Good evening again. I see many familiar faces in the crowd from last week, so thank you for coming back. I am Jennifer Lunsford. I am the first vice president for the Greater Fayette Republican Women's Club. So I'm also sharing two hats tonight. I'm also the second vice chair of the Fayette County Republican Party. We are going to get started tonight with an invocation. Dr. Yardy, would you love to pray over us?
I most certainly will. Lord Jesus, thank you for this wonderful day. Thank you, Lord, for bringing us here safely. And thank you, Lord, for giving us the strength to deal with this day and some days that will follow. We have some stormy days ahead, Jesus, and we know that we need that strength. We appreciate all of your blessings. We appreciate your mercy. It's been a good day, Lord, and it's been a safe day. And we pray that you get us home safely. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, this evening, I am joined by the chairman of the Fayette County Republican Party, Randy Ojono, and also by the Fayette County Men's Club representative, Joe Smith, and the Greater Fayette Republican Women's Club president, Angela Bean. If you all could stand and just join up. Tonight, we are actually at a Fayette County Republican Men's Club. We totally hijacked their meeting tonight so that we could bring this candidate forum to you, because we feel that tonight is incredibly important to have Karen Mapiak and David Ballard here tonight to talk to us before the elections start next week. Can y'all believe the primary early voting is next week? It's crazy, isn't it? The official election day, just in case you need that for your calendars, is May 24th. So vote before the 24th, definitely. Before we get started, our chairman for the Fayette County Republican Party has a couple of a welcome note and welcoming you and recognizing guests, y'all. Thank you. All right.
Welcome. Good to see a crowd. First of all, we want to welcome any elected officials we have tonight, other than the ones that are going to be speaking tonight. Is there anybody? Don't see any. So we'll do the same for candidates other than the ones speaking tonight. We'll go around the room.
Allison Otto, and running for School Board District 2.
William Yardy, I am running for School Board District number 4.
Do we have any first-time people here? First time anybody's been here? Don't see any. Well, I'd just like to say, May is almost here. Primary is beginning. One thing we got to realize, we got to get people out to vote, especially get the Republican friends out to vote. Once we get them out to vote, though, it's not over. There's going to be runoffs. So we need to make sure we get that many people out to vote in the runoff. I mean, the problem we have is people say, well, my candidate got canned in the first round, so I'm not interested in voting the next round. Well, that can't be the case. We got to vote, and that's got to carry on to the general election. Because sure enough, some of the people that win the Republican nomination are not going to be the ones certain people voted for. But those people that voted for the ones that didn't win that nomination, gotta get out and vote. I mean, this year is especially important, and we need to do everything we can in our power to get people out to vote. Thank you.
I do want to take 1 second for Joe Smith. He is our men's club representative and he's here tonight. Just want you to stand up and tell the crowd about the men's club and what you guys are doing.
Okay, well, tonight we're doing something different, but we meet, the 4 Tuesdays of, every month at 6:30 at this location. And, we actually have a speaker for June here.
Oh,
So, and, the next meeting is actually on election night, so we maybe do something interesting then. So,
excellent.
so it's, every month we'll have a program.
Thank you. The same goes for our Greater Fayette Republican Women's Club. Sometimes, Angela, I don't know if you would agree, but I feel like we're like a big civics class.
Yes, absolutely.
Because I don't know if y'all know, but civics has been removed from most education. So our parties, our organizations, we are here to educate everyone on Republican conservative values and issues that are coming at us. So, also really quick want to thank the committee that helped organize these last 2 candidate forums. So Randy Ojino, Elaine Watts, Angela Bean, Sean James, Marie Parker, Cheryl Walleen, Claudia Eisenberg. I just want to thank you all very much for your work in putting this together. We could not have done it alone. All right, before we get the candidates up here, I thought it would be important to share with you how the forum is going to work this evening. To begin, the candidates will have 4 minutes for introductions. Then we will move to questions. These questions were created by the Greater Fayette Republican Women's Club and the Fayette County Republican Party representatives on the committee. We also have a few questions that were submitted online through registration. Then we might have had a few at the door. Everyone had an opportunity to submit a question at the door. If you still want to submit a question at the door, please do so. Cheryl is back here with some paper and pens. When we are done with the submitted questions, each candidate is going to have 2 minutes to answer your questions. If another candidate is referred to by name in the answer, they will also have time to address that candidate. In the end, we have decided this evening that if we have time and you have a question to ask after all of the questions have been asked, if you would like to ask a question at that time to go back to something they mentioned, we're going to take about 2 or 3 questions at the end of the evening. However, that will depend on the time of the evening. But we did want to give our candidates and you an opportunity to talk to each other. All right, so candidates, if you guys, gentlemen, ladies, men, if you will come on up. It's a little different with just 2 of you tonight. Karen and Karen has been our State House representative for District 73 since 2015, and she has a chiropractic practice in Griffin. David Ballard, her challenger for this election cycle, is a Fayette County native and an attorney here in Fayetteville since 2014. My understanding is that this district has changed. It's shifted. They created a new one, the District 74. I believe this is a current map of the new district in the back. But we are now going to be covering Woolsey, Brooks, Stars Mill,
And then a little bit of Peachtree City and Braylon, so you've got part of Braylon as well.
Yeah, thank you, because I know the bottom part, but you also are going to be covering parts of Henry County and Spalding
City
County.
of Hampton, as well as North Spalding, as well as West Spalding from Digby all the way basically to Griffin on 16. It's a big district.
So those of you who are watching this video back, if you live in those areas, these are your 2 candidates for the primary election. All right, joining me this evening as your moderators, Angela Bean, our Greater Fayette Republican Women's Club president, and Elaine Watts, our vice chair of the Little bio on both of them. So Angela has served as a moderator for many candidate forums held right here in the Fayette County headquarters. That includes local, state, and congressional races. Her political activism began in 2005 as a spokesperson for the National Fair Tax while traveling the Southeast to events with Congressman John Linder. She was a sponsor of the federal legislation and radio talk host Neil Bortz and Herman Cain. As a citizen lobbyist at the Georgia State Capitol for 15 years, Angela has worked with many different conservative groups and legislators for state tax reform, health care rights, verifiable voting, and state sovereignty issues, including nullifying Common Core national standards. Angela is currently serving us as the president of the Greater Fayette Republican Women's Club, and she is a Georgia Republican Party State Committee member, as well as a Fayette representative to the GOP 13th Congressional District. Personally, the one thing I would like to say about Angela Bean is I believe she could write and read a bill better than any legislation. I don't know. She knows her stuff is the point. Elaine Watts, like I said, he's the first vice chair of the FCRP. He is a former chairman of the FCRP, but he also has moderated many forums and debates, as well as led political board meetings and GOP conventions. These two are going to really bring it to you tonight. I hope you're ready. And really quick, before we get started, Lane, a very important gentleman has walked into the room, and we do want to recognize him.
Yeah, Josh, let him in.
Oh.
Let him in.
Josh Bonner is here this evening. He is state representative. The good news is, you are not contested this year. Is that correct?
Josh.
I can only oppose myself.
There you go. Thank you for being here. We wanted to recognize you when you came in. All right, at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Lane. He is going to begin this evening's question and answer time. Oh, and Randy is going to be timing the candidates. You will be able to see that time, as well as the candidates can see it on the computer. So, at least we know how long we have. All right.
Thank you, Jennifer. Good evening, everyone. Good evening, Representative Masiak, Mr. Ballard.
From your lips to God's ears.
We're going to begin, moving on. We're going to begin with opening statements. So we'll start with you, Karen, 4 minutes, and then David, 4 minutes, and then we'll get into the Q&A. So,
Are these on?
yeah, you got to turn
It's on. I could hear it. Thank you, everybody, for being here tonight. Thank you, Angela and Lane and Jennifer and Randy, everybody putting this together. It's so important for us to be able to get in front of you and for you to ask questions of us. I'm Karen Mathiak. I've represented District 73 since 2016. Actually, I got elected in 16 and sworn in 17. So I live in Spalding County, at the north end of Spalding County, and I am a chiropractor that has been in business for almost 40 years. So I've been here for a minute. I like to tell the story of when I was chairman of the Spalding County GOP. We had such a great relationship with most of the GOPs on the south side, and Fayette County was one of the GOPs that I spent a lot of time here because I cut my teeth in leadership in GOP with some of the ladies here, including Lane's mom and some of the other ladies that were here. I'm excited about being a representative because it means a lot when we have somebody that cares about us and cares about the south side at the Capitol. So many times, our voices don't get heard. We kind of get lost in the shuffle. And I thought that I would be one of those legislators that would be able to do that. The other thing that I'm very proud of is we have delegations on the south side now that work very, very well together. Representative Bonner, I'm so glad that you're here tonight because I have a lot of respect for him as our chairman of our delegation. We work well with our senator, Marty Harbin, and that's what makes good legislation, that's what makes good policy, and that's what makes it good for us as citizens of the state of Georgia. So, with all that being said, I am also a chairman now, so I am in leadership too. I've been in leadership for 2 years now. I have a small committee, state planning and community affairs, I also am seated on Health and Human Services, Insurance, Higher Ed, and MARTOC. So there's, as you get through time at the legislature, you are put on more committees. So we only think we're busy right now through campaign season. For those 40 days, we hit the ground running. So I'm proud of that, and I'm proud of being in leadership. It means a lot for us on the south side, and it just bodes well. It does well for us. So that's what I have to say. Thank you.
Am I ready? I want to thank the Fayette County Republican Party for sponsoring this tonight and allowing us the opportunity to present our views to you. I also, and I'm neglected to do this in Spalding this morning, I'd like to do it now. I'd like to thank Karen Mathiak for her service in the former District 73. I know it's a difficult job. I appreciate you doing it. I also think that you're a good person with a good heart, despite whatever differences we may have. In looking at this district, we're now coming to a time of choosing, as Ronald Reagan would say. When we look at the various communities in this new creation called District 74, we see Hampton, where a liberal left-wing government in Henry County is threatening conservatives, doxing them even, and they are desperate for leadership that will use and leverage the power of the state to defend them. In Spalding, we see a community held back by violent crime, the second highest crime rate in the state of Georgia, along with a lack of educational opportunities for its citizens that keeps it from its rightful place as the vanguard of the community, in the great communities of the state. But here in Fayette County, the question fundamentally comes down to whether we will matter at all. As thousands of people were taken out of the old 73 and thousands upon thousands have been added here in Fayette County, the experience you need and the experience that matters is the experience of loving this community and caring about it, which is what I have done for my entire life. When I look at experience, I will note that I have, as a lawyer, touched just about not every part of the Georgia Code, but everything from criminal law to probate law to personal injury to our Civil Practice Act. I have seen lots of legislation and even found many mistakes that have been made from the General Assembly that I've been able to exploit even to win a victory earlier this year in the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals. There's not many lawyers who can claim an 11th Circuit Court victory, but I can, and in doing so protected the Roth IRA accounts of many all Georgians really. But beyond that, when I look at experience, I also would state that I'm no stranger to helping people in tumultuous times as far as experience go. People hire me with some of the worst problems that they've ever experienced in their entire life. Their marriages collapsing, their children going to jail, their house on the verge of foreclosure. I have no problem representing people in tumultuous times. The experience I bring is someone who grew up in Fayette County, who absolutely loves this community, somebody who opened a law practice here and helped thousands upon thousands of people with their legal problems, someone who raises his family, even here on her birthday, and raised my family in Brooks, is serving as the town attorney for the city of Woolsey, is someone who bought their first house in Peachtree City and had wonderful experience riding my bike on the trails and almost getting run off the road several times by teenagers in golf carts. This community is my home and I love it with every last fiber of my being. 6 generations of my family are buried in the soil of Fayette County. And when I saw the maps that were passed by this legislature, when I saw what happened to our community as it was torn asunder, as our community was ripped to pieces, and then I looked at a continued series of evidence that Fayette County just simply was not getting it done under the gold dome like it once did, from everything from judge appointments to this map that stands before us, I decided to throw my hat in the ring and offer myself to service. I absolutely love Fayette County. I will be a strong representative for Hampton. I'll be an excellent representative for Spalding County. But you should know that I love this community with every fiber of my being, and it'd be the privilege of my life to serve as your representative.
All right, thank you, Candace. We're going to begin round 1 of the questions. Under the state constitution, the only requirement for the Georgia General Assembly every year is to pass a budget. This year was a record-setting year for Georgia, with the passage of a $30.2 billion budget. What are the highlights of the budget, Representative Matziak, that will benefit the citizens of District 74? The part of the question for Mr. Ballard is, what are your thoughts on the state budget? And we'll begin with Representative Matziak.
I think with this budget, where do I start? There's so many pieces to the budget. Economic development, health and human, transportation, just each piece that we vote on is vetted very well through appropriations committees. We have to sit and, we have the opportunity, I should say, to sit and listen to everybody within the state that has a piece of transportation, of health and human, of economic development. So what happens is those asks come to those committees, our appropriations, the big appropriation committee balances it out, and then it comes for the House to vote on. As far as our community goes, I think the whole state will benefit from our budget. I think we've done a great job. Terry England was the appropriations chairman for many years. He retired this time. We've lost some great leaders this session that are retiring. He's one of them. I can't imagine who they will put in that position, but I think the whole state will benefit from the budget in and of itself.
Thank you. As a general rule, I'm a fiscal conservative, and I don't necessarily want to say it's just been tons and tons of money with the budget. I will say that some concerns that I had prior to the session may have actually been addressed. One was for our GBI crime lab was significantly underfunded. And so one problem that we had in many criminal cases is that they were delayed for months and months and months and months and months because they just didn't have the ability to test blood that was being sent, drugs. Somebody would say, well, we think this is drugs, and they would send it off, and 5 months later, we don't know if it's drugs yet. 6 months later, we don't know. 9 months later, and you take that and you combine it with the already the coronavirus backlog, that was a huge problem. What I'm unaware of and not certain of at this time is whether we actually provided some of the funding for local drug courts in particular. We didn't have any significant probation officers who could actually test people in the drug court system. And that's a huge problem. You don't really have a functioning drug court if you don't know if people are actually using the drugs. And so they were actually trying to outsource it, but that wasn't working very well. So I'm hoping that that issue was addressed. I'm uncertain if it was at this time. There's some matters that, as it pertains to the budget, really will be more under GDOT that I would like to explore. And keep in mind that I state all this, that Fayette County contributes significant money to the state coffers. And so when I'm talking about giving money, I'm really talking about your money coming back to Fayette County or to benefit Fayette County, as opposed to going to Effingham County or to Cobb or Gwinnett. There are some projects, for example, that we need in terms of in Peachtree City for the 7454 connector. I know that there's been some work on that. But we also, when I talked to the Chamber of Commerce, the one thing that they really would like to see fixed is the interchange at the I-85 and 74 in Fairburn. That's the lifeline to the county.
Thank you, candidates. Continuing in the same vein about budget issues, the state budget always includes funding for infrastructure and capital improvement projects. Fayette County is sometimes thought of as the redheaded stepchild of the Atlanta Regional Commission because we are the only county in the ARC to not have an interstate run through it. So getting our share of funds for road projects can be a challenge. How will you work within the district, and particularly Fayette County, to ensure that we will receive our share of funding from the state coffers? And we'll begin with Mr. Ballard.
Well, thank you. I think it's a nice segue. I'm persistent. I also understand I'm very loud, so I'll pull back the microphone. But I will state that, do I even need the microphone? Can y'all hear
Yes,
me?
you need.
Okay. Well, in any event, I would, like I said, like to continue to lobby GDOT to try to get funds to fix that interchange. Everybody states that that is a significant problem. Not only is it dangerous and that we've had some deaths at that particular interchange, but beyond that, it is essential for Fayette County, since we don't really have any, well, we don't have any steady access to the county. That is a huge lifeline. It's essential for Trellis and the growth of Trellis here in Fayette County. It's essential for Peachtree City. And so that is something that I very much will work to try to solve for us in the county. And when you get into these sorts of fights over money, that's where it matters to have a representative who cares about Fayette County and loves Fayette County and wants to fight for it. Because quite frankly, what we see in many situations, whether it's the Griffin Judicial Circuit or whether it's districts in general, is that there's just many people who don't have Fayette County's best interest at heart. They would, for example, like pick your judges. Upstate County picks all our Superior Court judges, it seems, but they want Fayette County to pay for it. And what you need is a representative who will go to Atlanta and always fight for Fayette County. You pay tax money. Your money goes to Atlanta. I will go back there and fight hard to make sure that you get your fair share of what you send up to Atlanta. Otherwise, let's just cut the taxes and get you the money back in your pocket, which would be fine with me too. But if we're going to have tax dollars flowing to Atlanta, then and if that's what we're going to do, then Fayette County deserves its fair share, and you need somebody from Fayette County to take care of it, and you need and that's what should happen, and that's what I will do if elected.
This last session, we had the opportunity to elect a new DOT representative. In the past, our DOT representative has been from Columbus. That's kind of been the history. This time, we elected Dennis McIntyre from Coweta County, so that's a little closer to our hearts. And I think that once he gets his feet wet, he will do very, very well. He was CEO of Noonan Utilities, understands engineering, and I'm very proud that he will be our leader for our projects like that. The one thing that I hear you say, David, is talking about just Fayette County. We represent 3 separate counties, and all 3 of our counties are very different, very different. And yes, Fayette County tends to, we don't have the major thoroughfares, but we have 85. We have 1941 running through Henry and Spalding. We have 16 that needs some major help. I think you will agree with me there. The truck traffic that will be coming from the port through our state goes right through us as a community. I think that those are things that we have been fighting for and that we are looking at. I too love our community. I too love District 74. And I think that that love and that caring and the honor of representing you and working well with the DOT will make a difference.
May I respond? This should be my day.
Sure. Was it 1 minute or 2 minutes?
Thank you. I'm very well aware that there are 3 counties in the district, and I understand that each of them have unique challenges and opportunities. In Spalding, the primary one is to try to do something about the terrible gang problem and drug addiction. But in terms of transportation issues, one thing that always has come up in Spalding for as long as I've been alive has been the discussion of the Spalding Airport and having business jets come into the Spalding Airport. And I'm aware of that. And in Spalding County, that would be something I'd be willing to fight for. I'm aware of the transportation needs elsewhere. One of the first places I went in this campaign was to Hampton and went to Sweeties, which is a flea market on the side of the road, and spent about an hour and a half talking to the owner of that facility, who talked about problems with 1941, how it causes massive flooding. What basically happens is whenever it rains, The water just flows off 1941 into Sweeties and causes all sorts of problems. And interestingly, he had tried to call his local state representative time and time and time again and got no response. And so I will respond to the calls from everybody in the district when it comes to any problem, including transportation problems on 16 in 1941.
Thank you. One of the reasons I understand that we had such a large budget passed this year is because in 2021, the revenue in Georgia, we had $3.7 billion budget surplus, $3.7 billion more in revenue than what was budgeted. $1.6 billion, or only about half of that, will be returned to the citizens as state income tax refunds. Representative Mafiat, what do you feel is the best way to handle the extra funds when we have budget surpluses?
As you well know, we're getting some of that returned to our citizens. The other thing that I would like to point out is our rainy day fund, and that has been something that Governor Gale was very, it was very important for him to make sure that we had that rainy day fund. Partly because back during, I hate to use the word recession, but I think everybody knows what I'm saying. We had such extreme cuts that he asked for 10%. Wait a minute. Yeah, he asked for 10%. A lot of the departments took at least that so that we could balance the budget. That was before my time. So now we're kind of in the fat time. So that money that can come back to us and still have the rainy day fund and be able to fund some of the projects that we need throughout our counties and through our state is important, and I think that that's where some of it will come back.
Mr. Ballard, how do you feel about budget surpluses, and what's the best way to handle that?
Well, I think that we all are Republicans and we're all conservatives, and I think that we believe, or the Republican Party's always believed in my lifetime, that money is best in your pocket, that you spend it better than the government can, and that's ultimately the way you grow an economy, that the free market does its magic and is always going to be more productive than government spending. So I would support, obviously, getting that money back into the pockets of Georgians to the maximum extent possible. I will state that I think that Georgia is a fairly well-run state fiscally. I'm proud of our triple A bond rating and wouldn't do anything to want to jeopardize that. I also agree that rainy day fund is advisable because, quite frankly, with Joe Biden running the country into the ground economically, eventually we're going to have some serious problems beyond inflation. These chickens are going to come home to roost. I'm very concerned about, as mortgage rates tick up, a housing market crash. I started my career as an attorney helping small business owners in bankruptcy during the Obama years. It was great for bankruptcy lawyers. It was terrible for everybody else. And with that example before me, you always have to be prepared for the times of famine. I think that the Bible gives us the example of saving up for 7 years for the 7 years of famine, and I think that's advisable. So I would actually commend the legislature for getting some money back into the pockets of Georgians with tax cuts, but we also do need to maintain the rainy day fund.
Thank you. Mr. Ballard, this past session, the General Assembly passed a Georgia income tax credit. The rollback, the current rate is 5.75%. The rollback will go to 4.99% over 6 years. What are your thoughts on the tax cut?
Well, like I said, I'm in favor of tax cuts. I don't have any. I'm happy to see more money into the pockets of Georgians to the extent we can do so. I typically, as far as taxes go, prefer sales tax to income when possible. I think it's better to tax people for what they spend as opposed to what they earn. And I think that that's a healthier tax balance generally. So I would probably want to shift our taxes if possible in that direction. But you know, I celebrate tax cuts. I'm a conservative Republican. I'm happy to see more money into the pockets of Georgians whenever we have that opportunity. But I do think, as a general rule, I guess my order of taxes, property taxes are my least favorite because I view that's like you're renting from the government, essentially, your own land. Income taxes being probably my second least favorite. And of all the evils, I guess, sales tax would be my least evil to the extent that you can maybe not have user fees. User fees might be the most fair of all. whenever practical.
Representative Mathiak?
I think we agree on that. I think that the legislature took a huge bite out of the apple on our fair taxes. We've listened. I think that fair tax has been talked about for at least 20 years. And I think it's sad that it took us this long to at least take the bite out of the apple, but I think we did do that. I think that it will continue. This is just the beginning. And I'm proud that we finally got something done. So that, yay, legislature, we listened.
So let's just talk about the fair tax a minute more. Several of our statewide candidates are supporting elimination completely of our state income tax. A few of them are mentioning the Georgia fair tax as a replacement tax. Would you like for both of you to share, would you support that initiative, 100%, halfway? How do you feel about it, Representative Mathiak?
I think that being said is what we've done this year is we are starting to take those steps towards that. I think I'm glad that we've done it that way, so it's not such a great fall or a great change, and I think that's something that we will continue to do.
Mr. Ballard?
Well, one thing I should add, I guess, as to the income tax, and I guess I could say a little hypocritical in some respects as to the film credits, which I would like to eventually be able to phase out at some point, but for the time being, because they're important to Fayette County and Trilla, I'm willing to keep them for the time being. But I guess, in general, I think I'd like to, if nothing else, see us flatten out the income tax. I think when you close loopholes and when you close special interest deductions, that's generally better and more fair. When it's a flatter tax, that's generally the better way to go. I am in favor, like I said, of shifting from the income tax over to the sales tax to the extent possible. I'd like to look at the fiscal ramifications before I say 100%, because I will say this, every state's a little bit different. Georgia's not Florida with massive amounts of tourism, for example. They're able to benefit greatly from their toll roads, which they fund a lot of their infrastructure through, and they're willing to also get more money from sales tax as well. Although we'll see with Mr. DeSantis if Disney gets as much of that money going forward. But also when you look at Texas, for example, their tax structure is different because they have a lot of oil, and we don't have oil in Georgia. So I'm mindful of the fact that our economies are not the same as some of those states that have been able to successfully get rid of the income tax. But to the extent possible and fiscally feasible and responsibly, I would be in favor of shifting tax over to sales as much as possible.
Very good. Well, one of my passions this past couple of years has been election integrity, and this is a campaign issue for every candidate from school board all the way up to President of the United States. And after 18 months of hearings and investigations, do you feel that Senate Bill 202 passed last year was enough to fix the irregularities found in Georgia with the voting system? And second part of that question, 3 very important bills didn't get passed on election integrity this session, and one of them was our own Senator Harbin's security ballot bill, and all we were asking the General Assembly to do was to define what security paper is. And they failed to do that, but it looked like there may have been some leadership issues stopping that from a vote. So Karen, Representative Mathiak, would you share your thoughts with us on election integrity?
Absolutely. Yes, I think 202 made some great strides for us. I am sad that the Senate stopped Senator Harbin's bill on paper. I think that was another big, huge step for us. And as time goes on, I have been watching some of the things that have happened in Fayette and Henry and Spalding with our election office per se. I don't think we're done with it yet. I think that it's going to take some time. I hope that we can push it quicker. I would love to get in front of a judge with some of this information that our communities have put together. I tell you people, this community, every time I speak in front of you, that we have got to get involved in our election process. If our eyeballs are there, we have a voice. we can see the things that are going on. We've found so many irregularities in all 3 counties, and again, I just hope that we can get it in front of a judge quickly. I think sometimes things move too slowly for me, but sometimes that's bureaucracy. I don't want to blame it on that, but I think the more people that get involved, the better off we are, because we have a voice then.
Mr. Ballard, your thoughts on that?
Don't care about election integrity? I didn't know this. No, in all seriousness, obviously we still have a lot to do. Every time there's an illegal vote anywhere in the state of Georgia, that's a legitimate vote that's lost somewhere else. It is absolutely unacceptable. People fought and died on the battlefield to defend your right to vote, and the least I could do is defend it in the legislature. I was disappointed. I know there was a lot of effort in that regard heading to the Senate and the Ethics Committee of the Senate, from everything from watermarks on paper ballots to auditing procedures to you name it, and all that went away. Here's my position on it. I will do whatever it takes to make sure that your right to vote is protected. If we have to get rid of the Dominion voting machine, so be it. If we have to whatever we have to do, I will do to make sure that your vote is protected. We have some good candidates running for Secretary of State, and the right ones win. If I win this nomination, if they're campaigning in the general down in Effingham County, I don't care where they're at, I don't need to be picking on Effingham County. Clinton is even farther away. I will get in my car in Fayetteville and drive down there to meet with him and talk with him about what do we do to protect people's vote, and I will prepare a bill to that effect and introduce it, and you hold me accountable in February when I come back to report on the progress of that bill.
Can I make an extra comment?
Sure. I'd like to make extra comment to that. I wrote House Bill 769 to give our communities a little better board.
Representative Mayhew, could you describe 769?
769 allowed for two Democrats, 2 Republicans that are appointed by the prospective clubs or organizations, and then the 5th member was appointed by our judges within our circuit here. We will continue to push that. We will continue to put that in as many counties as we can. Some counties already do it, but again, I think it's something that election integrity needs to be at the top of the list.
Mr. Ballard, did you want to say anything else on that? Election integrity? Since she had an extra comment, did you want to make an extra comment? Or?
I will put a stop to any election fraud. We will solve this issue once and for all.
All right, thank you. The next hot topic amongst our voters this year is education. A lot of bills came through the General Assembly affecting our K-12 public education. House Bill 1084 passed, protects the students, it's the student's first act, prohibits using critical race theory. Congratulations to our General Assembly for getting that passed. Senate Bill 435, integrity and safety in sports, prohibits biological males from participating in female sports. And parental rights protection, Senate Bill 514, Unmasked Georgia Students Act passed. These are great for families and parental rights. But one legislation that did not pass, Senate Bill 449, it passed in the Senate. This was the Parents' Bill of Rights, which would have affirmed parental rights to direct the upbringing and moral or religious training of a minor child. It passed the Senate, but it died in the House. Representative Mayhew, can you give us some insight on that? And how important was that piece of legislation needed in Georgia for passage?
It was your bill, Judge. It did pass.
I had it died in the House. Senate Bill 449, Parents' Bill of Rights.
It did pass.
House Bill 1187 was the exact same version. It passed and it's being signed into law on Thursday.
Okay, so repeat that again.
House Bill 1187 is the exact same language. It was the House version of that Senate bill.
Okay.
It's being signed on Thursday.
Okay, so the Parents' Bill of Rights is the same. Well, thank you, Representative Bonner, for clearing that up. All right, good. So let's talk about
That was
education.
his bill. That's my-
And Representative Bacon is the co-sponsor of that.
Very good, well, thank you very much. So, as we move forward, Representative Mathiak, what exactly should the state's role be in education when it comes to the autonomy of our local school districts?
I think each district needs to police their own schools in this. We pay school taxes for a reason. And I think that so many times we take away the individual rights of our communities and our counties. I think there needs to be an umbrella, but I think that each school system should have their own rights in what they want to teach. I think that we do need to get back to reading, writing, and arithmetic rather than some of the other things that we're doing. I know that sometimes that sounds very old-fashioned, but when I see kids, and I just heard this morning about kids being graduated from high school that cannot read, that cannot make change without the computer sitting in front of them to tell them what kind of change that you should get back at a fast food restaurant. And I think that we have been disingenuous with our children in not making sure that they're in school. Yes, that's up to the parent, but I think that the school systems could do a little better job in bringing in, making sure that our kids are in school. They can't learn if they're not there. And I think that's one of the biggest problems that we have within our communities.
Mr. Ballard, same question. What do you see as the state's role in public education?
Well, one thing I'll note is I did see, obviously, that the Parents' Bill of Rights passed, and for the most part, that repeated a lot of federal protections that already existed under federal law. There were some minor changes, but my law professor from the University of Georgia was pretty much quoted as saying, yeah, it's an okay bill, doesn't really do a whole lot. It's basically the end result of it. I would also state that there were some things the legislature did not do, for example, which was, for example, stop teaching people, or our children who are 8, 9 years old in primary school about transgendered issues and sexual things of that nature. I don't think that has any place whatsoever in our elementary schools. Our elementary schools need to be about teaching people to read, how to write, basic arithmetic. We don't need to be talking about the 64 genders to 8, 9-year-olds. That's something that very much needs to be addressed from the state level. In general, I think promoting transparency and then allowing the school boards and excellent school board candidates to step forward to deal with the issue is important. The other thing I think we need to discuss in that regard too is school choice. There is, in Fayette County, of course, we have an excellent school system. Many people move to Fayette County for the good schools, and they move for the public safety. In Spalding County, in addition to having the second highest violent crime rate in Griffin, it's also ranked 153 out of 159 in terms of the school system. And a lot of the people I talk to in the campaign trail don't have their kids in the public schools. They homeschool, they look to charter schools, they look for private schools, such as even the Stepping Stone Academy in Griffin, where I was welcomed earlier in this campaign. And so I would be in full favor of promoting school choice in that regard, especially since we, in the last legislative session, had enough money to fully fund the QBE formula for public education. This is the time for school choice if we're going to implement it. Now is the time, and I will promote it in the legislature.
QBE was fully funded.
I said it before.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry, misunderstood. Thank you.
All right, we're good. Mr. Ballard, I'm going to start with you with this question because you referenced it earlier about the industry tax credits. Most people know that filmmakers have been coming to Georgia since about 2008 when Governor Perdue and the legislature back then enacted these tax credits to draw them here. These same film industries who have benefited from this tax credit have threatened to leave Georgia over the heartbeat bill passed in 2019 and signed into law by Governor Kemp. It is now working its way in the courts and it is on hold. Given the response by the industry of this legislation, is it time to eliminate tax credits for the film industry or any other major corporation that may be getting special tax treatment who come out in opposition to laws passed by the state of Georgia? Ms. Ballard, we'll start with you.
I've thought about this issue for a very long time, even before I decided to run, because I don't really like special interest tax credits. It smacks of crony capitalism. However, I'm also mindful of the fact that for Fayette County in particular, we have a lot riding on Trilla and what was formerly Pinewood Studios. This is the home where Marvel was produced, etc. And it's for the whole district. I mean, The Walking Dead's being filmed down in Griffin. It's the Commonwealth, actually. And so what I would like to do is wean off the film industry from these tax credits and turn the tables on them. I like them to have so much post-production development here in Georgia and so much infrastructure in Georgia that we turn the tables on them. And where Hollywood doesn't get to dictate to Georgia, but Georgia dictates to Hollywood, that they can't afford to leave here because they'll lose so much money because of the infrastructure that we've established here in Fayette, Spalding, and Henry counties. That's what I would like to do. And part of the way you can do that is through your workforce development. For example, I talked with the administrators at Southern Crescent earlier in the campaign down in Griffin, and one thing they said they would really like to have more access to is film training, so that we can teach people how to get these very high-paying or potentially high-paying jobs in the film industry. Post-production is a huge issue. If we can get post-production in Georgia, that really, really helps cement this here. Because what we don't want to have in the film industry is what ultimately happened in North Carolina, where they wanted more money, they wanted more money, they wanted more money. North Carolina finally said, we're not going to throw any more tax dollars at you, and then it just all disappeared and went away. But I also don't think we can continue to subsidize this indefinitely. And so what I would like to do is, again, have the infrastructure in place to where they don't have to have these tax credits to stay in Georgia, but essentially they just can't afford to leave. It'd be like Delta leaving because the infrastructure is here in Georgia.
I was one of the proponents of the heartbeat bill, and I remember when the film industry said, if you pass this, we will leave. And I thought, okay, wait a minute. If I say it's okay to kill babies, you're gonna leave. I'm sorry, I'm sorry, but you'll have to leave. I feel that strongly about babies and making sure that they have life. Some of the tax credits that we had were sellable, and I think that we have been, had some great conversation and some bills that we've written about not being able to sell those tax credits to Louisiana, for example. And maybe it is time for us to relook at some of those tax credits. I like the idea of the tax credits being here. If the movie or the music industry starts in Georgia and ends in Georgia, then we have an infrastructure of workforce. And with Southern Crescent Technical College, we've spent a lot of money there putting in film classes in the film industry, not only editing, but I would like to see some writing classes too.
All right, thank you, candidates. We're going to move on to public safety, and we'll start with you, Representative Manziak, for this question. Rising crime is all around us. It's a very major concern for families here in this district and all over the state of Georgia. Violent crime in the city of Atlanta is up 60% in the last 2 years. Meanwhile, overall arrests are down by about 43% as Atlanta's police force remains more than 400 officers under its authorized level. What can or should be done legislatively to address this critical situation in Georgia's capital city?
Thank you. I think defunding the police was the worst idea on planet Earth. I don't know what people were thinking when that even was a conversation. I think that, especially in Atlanta per se, I think that they do need to look to hire. Some of our officers have gone elsewhere because of how their pay structure was. We put some money back into that. We've done a lot of things, a lot of legislative pieces to support not only law enforcement, but our first responders. And personally, I think that our gang legislation, I'm hoping that our judges will be able to use that and stop some of the gang activity. Our jails are full of people that are quote-unquote gang members, and all of our sheriff personnel has all said that's the recruiting place for gang members is within our county jails. So I think that anything that we can do to shore them up, if it costs us in some tax dollar, I think it would be tax dollar well invested.
Mr. Ballard?
I'll be real honest with you. Why I care about Atlanta, the city I'm most concerned about right now is Griffin. It's in the district, well, some of it's in the district. Griffin has the second highest violent crime in the state of Georgia. It's higher than Atlanta. We can pick on Atlanta all we want, Griffin's higher. The only city in Georgia by the FBI crime statistics that has more violent crime is East Point. You know, it's not College Park, it's not Atlanta, it's not, Savannah, it's Griffin. And that's terrible. I mean, we can't, and I get the Griffin Daily News delivered to my office every week. I get it in matches and I read it from cover to cover. And almost every one of those papers has somebody who has died in Griffin. And Griffin will never achieve its true potential and greatness until you solve that problem. We cannot allow people to continue to die in the streets of Griffin all the time from violence. I would like to retool our juvenile court as an important step in trying to deal with the problems in gangs. What we currently do is just slap them on the wrist, or slap them on the wrist, or slap them on the wrist, or slap them on the wrist, and then finally they turn to an adult and say, oh, 25 years in jail. And I think we can do much better than that. I've had very long, productive meetings with our juvenile court judges, in particular about how we can help Spalding County, but also help eliminate gang activity on our borders in Clayton and Fulton, which pose an existential threat to our well-being here in Fayette County. That's an important step in that. We also need to make sure that our drug courts function properly as well to try to combat drug addiction. And in general, I will do everything. I would like to have a symposium down in Griffin with every last major player, from the school board to the sheriff to the district attorney, etc., about what do we do to finally bring this problem in Griffin to an end in terms of violent crime.
All right, thank you. We're going to move on to another subject that can be somewhat controversial. We're going to start with you, Mr. Ballard. Legalized gambling. The expansion of legalized gambling keeps coming up at the legislature. There's been a push for casinos and horse tracks for several years. Even Atlanta Motor Speedway, the ownership of Atlanta Motor Speedway, they would like to add a horse track and a casino complete with a sports book to the Speedway complex located there in Hampton. What is your position on this issue?
Interesting question. The first person I talked to in Hampton was like, we want to have a casino at the Speedway and we want a MARTA train connected to it. I was like, oh my goodness gracious, I can't believe that. I never fucking support that. And it turned out that is not what most of the other people in Hampton apparently want. But I'll be real honest with you. I'd keep an open mind on it. I remember, I guess, traveling with my dad to the Sugar Bowl recently. Georgia, I think we lost that when we won the next year. But I remember being in Biloxi, and I'll be honest with you, I saw these casinos and I saw all these gambling addicts just hanging outside the casino, and it honestly just broke my heart, and I don't want that on our doorstep, to be honest with you. I just don't really see that is our future here in Georgia. I think we have a lot of economic opportunity in Georgia. I'm just not sure that's it. I will keep an open mind on this. I will listen to counter arguments. I always listen to a counter argument. I like a good debate. But my position at the moment is that let's get some real jobs in this place. Let's get some real industry in Georgia. Let's not sit around and rely on people to gamble away their last dollar to try to make a buck in this state.
Thank you. I also have an open mind too. I think that the people of our communities and the people of Georgia need to make that decision. So many times that we get such a split attitude towards gambling. If you go to Biloxi and you look at the license plates in Biloxi, and this is the argument that people will say, most of the license plates are Georgia license plates. The people that use the sports gambling off their phones, we collect 0 off of that. So that's an argument. So there again, I'm like you, David, I would like to have an open mind. I would like all of our citizens to be able to make that decision. I've looked at the proposal for the Atlanta Motor Speedway, the casino, and all the entertainment. It's all entertainment is what it boils down to. But again, what is the cost? What comes with it? What jobs come with it? What education comes with it? So I think it's something that we all need to make that decision on.
Thank you, Beth. Of all the questions that were submitted by those in attendance tonight, the most frequent question was concerning House Bill 1013, so we really have to talk about that. And House Bill 1013 was the mental health bill, and it looked like the legislation was trying to help those in our state with mental illnesses and substance abuse disorders. The challenge that the citizens found once the bill was passed in the House was that the World Health Organization was mentioned 11 times as the state of Georgia was going to follow their guidelines. Representative Mathiak, you did vote for passage of this bill. So the question is, why did you vote for the bill? And do you feel like the bill, after it got out of the Senate, is still a good piece of legislation?
Thank you. I did vote for this bill. And the reason I voted for this bill is because I knew that this had been vetted for well over 2 years. I don't think there's anybody in this room that has not dealt with some kind of mental illness. And when our police officers are tied up, when we don't have facilities to take people to that have some kind of mental disability, I think it's a shame. After we left, or before we left the senior citizen community or the center in Griffin today, somebody came to me and gave me some information about somebody with mental illness that is living in despicable, horrible situation. Where does she go? Where does she go? So I think with what the Mental Health Parity Act does is, number one, the insurance companies have to have that parity. So when your child is 14 years old and is talking about as a cutter or is talking about suicide, your insurance has to cover that 14-year-old. No more of this business of you get 72 hours and that's all. You get 30 days of medication and that's all. I think it's a very heartfelt bill. Representative Todd Jones was one of the writers of this bill, and part of it was because of his own son. And when we it went through Health and Human Services, we sat through hours and hours and hours of testimony. Judge Amaro from Henry County was one of the committee members. Numerous doctors, psychologists, psychiatrists, counselors, DFACs, law enforcement, anybody and everybody that touches somebody with mental illness was involved with this bill. And I just have great hope for it. I hope that that you will hear that the insurance, it was about insurance companies being in parity so that we can get the help that we need.
Thank you, Representative. Mr. Ballard, your thoughts on that bill?
I'm glad we have a bicameral legislature. I read the original bill that came out of the House. I read all 77 pages of it. And my initial thought as an attorney was there's a problem when you have a law enforcement can just take people in under a reasonable thought that they might be mentally ill. I mean, any court that upholds that is going to be, the Constitution just has to matter in some way. So that's a big concern. I've listened to the arguments presented by Representative Singleton. I think a lot of them were well taken in terms of whether it was going to have any sort of exemptions for plans that didn't actually cover this. Beyond that, I just had some concerns about, whether, for example, we were going to be diverting criminal activity from pedophilia or whatever into some of these mental health courts. There was just a lot of random concerns that came up with 1013. Let me tell you what really bothered me about 1013 was when it got over to the Senate, I was sent an open records request. And the open records request included some of the emails about how people were discussing this bill. And you had good conservatives who were stepping forward saying, we want to make the bill better by amending it this way to make sure it's not going to cover transgender surgery. So we want to make sure that it's not going to allow pedophilia to be treated differently for criminal purposes. We want to have some religious exemptions. All this is being discussed. And she was not part of this, I want to be very clear. But the way some of the people on Capitol Hill at the Capitol and lobbyists and whatnot talk about you, the people who knock on doors, the people who get candidates elected, the people who are the heart and soul of the Republican Party, acting like you were a bunch of extremists, was very offensive. I will never treat you like you don't matter. I will never treat you like you're some sort of coops. I will always listen to you as an important stakeholder in any legislation so that we can stop bad legislation from becoming law.
Very good. While we're on the topic of insurance companies, Representative Babiak, you serve on the insurance committee. Do you feel there would ever be a day where a bill might be put forward where we might ask insurance companies to fund treatments for patients that are seeking alternative treatments outside of the conventional norm, especially if the treatments are proven to be reliable and work for patients for healing? Do you ever see that happening?
Are you talking about cancer?
I'm talking about cancer treatments, which you know is near and dear to me right now, but there are alternatives that work, and our insurance companies will not pay for them. People are having to pay out of pocket even though they have full coverage.
As a chiropractor, anybody that's been to a chiropractor, you know that we look at health a little differently. We have a tendency to not do drugs and surgery as a first line of defense. So my mindset is a little different than some of the people in health and human services or the insurance world. It is my opinion that I think that we are just steps away from universal health insurance, which scares me. Because I think what it will happen is we're gonna lose some doctors that have been around a long time. We've talked a little bit about experience, and all of us in here know that when you have a doctor with some experience, sometimes it's just their innate ability to look at you and say, this is what we need to do, let's look at this test. And 90% of the time they're right. Personally, I would love to see insurance companies be a little, have some laterality to pay for something that a patient may want to try. Too many times the pharmaceutical companies get involved and they kind of rule the roost. This morning, Chairman Knight talked a little bit about PBM's pharmacy benefit plans, and there wasn't a person in the room that knew what that was, and it scared me, because I thought, oh my gosh, Chairman Knight, you've been working on that for how many years, and nobody in the room knew what that meant? What that meant was a pharmacy could not tell you that if you buy that blood pressure medication without your insurance, it's $2. If you're buying it through your insurance, it's $12 or $18. Take your pick.
Thank you, Representative. Mr. Ballard, we just passed House Bill 1013 that's forcing insurance companies to pay for mental health issues. Where would you stand on forcing insurance companies to pay for alternative care treatments?
Well, I'm an attorney, so I'm not the natural enemy of insurance companies. I fight insurance companies all the time, I guess. I, in general, am fine with having a wide variety of plans and letting the free market largely sort itself out. You know, I'm in favor of allowing people to select the coverage that best suits them and to be able to have that flexibility based on their needs or what they anticipate to be the needs for their family. I will say, and I would agree with Representative Mathiak on this point, that the move towards universal insurance is an extraordinarily dangerous development in the country and something that we as Republicans at all levels of government need to be very vigilant about. Obviously the major issue for the general election with Stacey Abrams is going to be the expansion of Medicaid in a massive way, not just some of the incremental steps that have been made by the legislature, such as the Pathways Plan that was approved with a waiver from President Trump and then later denied by President Biden in his infinite wisdom, but also just the expansion for mothers who from 6 months prenatal care to 1 year. But a massive expansion of Medicaid, as Stacey Abrams is proposing, is very dangerous for the well-being of the state. It's going to undermine private insurance. It's going to drive good doctors out of the industry. And it's going to ultimately leave you with less healthcare options. So I will always be in favor of fairness as far as insurance companies go, but my main prerogative is to make sure we don't move to socialized medicine.
Thank you. One last question before we move to questions from our audience, if there are any. Both of you have mentioned the Constitution, U.S. Constitution. Mr. Ballard, on your website you mentioned the First, Second, Fourth, Fifth, Sixth Amendments of the Constitution. But my question is, what about the 10th Amendment?
I thought you might ask that.
Really?
Yeah.
What role should our state leadership and our legislature use to push back on federal overreach? Federal overreach on education, federal overreach on our medical freedoms, federal overreach on anything and everything that's outside of their role in the Constitution. Mr. Ballard, what role should the legislature and our state leadership take?
Thank you. Maybe I should update my website to include the 10th Amendment as well. But in any event, one thing I look at in Missouri, for example, is the Second Amendment Protection Act. They have a very broad-based protection act in Missouri, which essentially prohibits some of the local law enforcement from enforcing some of the Biden administration prerogatives on gun control. The theory being that the federal government may issue these dictates, but ultimately the ones who will carry it out will be local law enforcement. And so I'm all in favor of, at every moment possible, fighting the Biden administration using every possible constitutional tool at our disposal. I think that that's an important way to do it. On the Second Amendment, for example, in particular, is to look at basically putting a straitjacket, so to speak, on the enforcement of some of the Biden prerogatives using some of our state actors. And that would be one example. I would be open to any number of things, but we have to fight back against the administration in Washington. It is a radical leftist regime that needs to be combated at every opportunity, with every tool at our disposal, and that is what I will do, including using full use of the 10th Amendment.
Thank you. Representative Mathiak?
I think I have a little different twist on it. I think what I would like to see is the Republican Party binding together with some great strategy that pushes back when some of the craziness that comes out of the federal government, that we can stand up and we can push back and our voices are heard. I think that our state is strong because we are strong, because we have voices that push back and believe in the amendments that were put forth before our forefathers, and that some of our not just fathers, but friends have fought for our freedoms within the United States.
All right, thank you. We're going to now open the floor. Does anyone have any questions? Cheryl?
Hi. In the past 2 years with the COVID issues that we've had, there's been a lot of mandates that have been coming down from government or private corporations, specifically vaccine mandates on employees. You have to be vaccinated or you'll lose your job. The military did that for the government. There's been very much a push for vaccines, especially since they're under the EUA, these are very experimental vaccines. What would you do to protect health freedom of the people of Georgia, whether they're in a government employee or private employers?
Thank you. I was very much against the mandates of masks and vaccines. I think that we should have that choice. The reason I feel that way is because just about everything that we read and we heard and we saw on every social media on planet Earth, nothing was consistent. And when we're injecting something into our bodies that was not tried for even a short period, I have great fear that we are going to see some things in the next 3 to 5 years, not only with our elderly, but with our young ladies that are of childbearing years. And time will tell. Time will tell. But when we start talking about drugs of that caliber, and you're mandating that for a federal employee, some patients of mine that work for the FAA would have lost their jobs had they not taken the jab. They tried the religious exemption. Some of them made it and some of them didn't. Some of them got that religious exemption for 6 months. And when I heard that, I said, oh, did your religious thoughts change after 6 months? Is that what the Biden administration was doing? Who knows? Who knows what they were doing? But I will always stand up for our health choices.
Mr. Brown.
With a stepson with special needs who has some vaccine allergies, your question is one that I think is near and dear to my heart as well. I think people are intelligent and that they should be able to make their own decisions about how they want to protect themselves and their family. I oppose any mandates of any sort in that regard, especially with drugs that are not fully tested. I think people can make the decision they want to use the vaccine, that they want to take it. People can make the decision they don't want to use it, and that should be permissible. You know, one of the things we were told about the vaccine was that it would stop transmission. You know, one of the points of all these mandates initially was it was going to make it less likely that you spread it. Well, that didn't work. That's just not true. But we were told that the masks were absolutely, well, first we were told the masks did not work. Then we were told the masks are absolutely essential and we must use the mask. Then we were told, well, actually, we're wrong, the masks are pretty much useless anyway. The CDC has shifted its guidance to the point where it has just destroyed confidence in public health in general. Now it went from, you quarantine 10 days, now you quarantine 5 days. I mean, it's just ever shifting. And it tended to be, I guess, when powerful interests were threatened, interestingly, all of a sudden the science would change. I like to say that one of my degrees from Georgia is in political science, and so I'm well qualified to work for the CDC if I want to. But I would agree with Karen on this one, no mandates.
All right. Yes, sir.
Follow the money, Jerry McGuire.
Speaking of the CDC, is there anything that can be done about their years of overreach? Like, I don't remember ever giving them permission to sign rent, for example, and all of the fact that people feel they need a religious exemption, it kind of feels like the government can force whatever they want to, and it's up to you to come up with an excuse. So, is there anything in the position that y'all are running for that you could do about it?
I think, Mr. Ballard, I think we start with you. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Is that fine with you? I think as far as the CDC goes, I mean, I listened to Anthony Fauci the other day, and he was complaining that the judiciary had to play second fiddle to the CDC. The CDC, has made its decision. Why do we have the courts involved with it? So, separation of powers just is completely irrelevant. Everything for the benefit of the health bureaucracy and for the health experts to dictate to you how you should live your lives. Total autocracy. It might be time on the state level. A lot of that needs to be reined in from the federal level. Obviously, the states can sue. The Attorney General of the state of Georgia can sue over some of this stuff insofar as it infringes on the rights of Georgians, and the state of Georgia and the Attorney General should do that. They should be very active in that regard. And it might be time for to take Ms. Dean and the 10th Amendment and give it a spin as well whenever we can. But we need to fight back against this. It is a dangerous thing, especially in a country where civics education is eroded to the point where people don't really think about separation of powers and federalism and things that you and I hold near and dear. It's very dangerous when you say, well, we just have to trust the science. And here's the thing about the science, too. Even if the CDC was absolutely right about all of this, which they're not, that's not the only consideration. I mean, whether the medical side of it is one thing, but you also have to consider the economic implications of some of these decisions. You have to consider the single mom who can't work because of these shutdowns that are being implemented. You have to consider the idea of basic constitutional rights. I mean, there's a lot that goes into public policy just beyond what the experts claim. So, absolutely, fight the CDC in every possible junction with every possible tool.
I'd like to see us take a deep dive into who really controls the CDC. Where does the money come from? Everything I do at the state level, in the back of my mind, I hear some of my leaders saying, leaders that I listen to, that they will say to me, where's the money? Where did the money come from? Where is it going? And why? And I think that we probably need to take a little deeper dive into the CDC, see who's really the investor there. Maybe even write some legislation to take a look at that. Policies and procedures, right?
Thank you. We have time for one more question. Going once?
Sorry. We've seen a push from some areas to limit the ability for our U.S. representatives and senators to make money on the stock market and investments while they're in office. It doesn't necessarily extrapolate as much down to the state level, but I'd like to know how you guys weigh in on that particular issue. Like, should we have, some restriction when we've got legislators, pushing the market in one direction, and we see somebody like Nancy Pelosi making, $100 million on, investments in electric vehicles and stuff. What should we do?
Isn't it funny how people will be broke and they go to Washington and they get so rich? I mean, it's just amazing how that happens. Obviously when you're talking about an executive office, we have, blind trust that comes into play. There's a little bit of a thought that shouldn't apply to legislators in the same way because legislators do have, an interest in how things carry out. But I'm open to any ethics provisions that prevent me or anybody else from profiting from their office. I think that that's important, and anytime you have people profiting from their office, it undermines the public trust. In the same vein as an attorney, while I will use the legislative leave, I'm not going to use it in a way that's abusive or improper to try to gain clients, for example. That's just something I wouldn't do. And that's been consistent with how I've tried to conduct myself in general in my business. My father was the district attorney, and if I'd wanted to, I could have taken felony cases, conflicted him out constantly, made a lot of money. I made a very early decision. I would never do that because that's unfair to the taxpayers of Fayette County. It's unfair to those who elected him to do that job. So I just didn't take certain cases, even though it cost me a lot of money to do that. And I won't take cases. He's now a Superior Court judge. If the case is at a certain point, a lot of rulings have been made, even though it costs me money and I don't get to take the case, I turn it down. And the reason is that it's unfair to the litigants to all of a sudden change judges. I think when you're in a position of public trust, you just have to sometimes understand that your own interests are subservient to those of the people, because it is a tremendous privilege to get to represent you in the legislature, and I will never forget that.
Representative McCann.
Thank you. Each politician has to sign, and not only sign, but attest to our disclosures. Our disclosures include our donations and our expenditures, but they also include our personal You ready? Okay. They also include our personal finances. And I think that that's probably one thing that we don't pay attention to as much as we should, especially at the federal level with the investments like you're talking about. I don't think I'd see it as much at the state level. I could be wrong, but I want to believe that we would not see it as much there. I think that we as a community, and I think that we as learned people here at the Republican Party should probably invest some time to look into some of our leadership at the congressional level. And I think those disclosures would tell us a whole lot.
All right, thank you. And we're going to move now to closing statements. We'll begin with Mr. Ballard. Your 2-minute closing statement.
Thank you. I want to thank the Republican Party again for this opportunity to speak and present to you today. In looking at this map of this new district, I was disappointed in the way it was done by the incumbents in the legislature. I thought it was wrong for Fayette County to be torn to pieces. If Stony Mathis doesn't win in November, thousands of good Fayette Republicans are going to be surrendered to Democratic strongholds in Fulton and in Riverdale and Clayton County. And essentially, Josh Bonner's district appears to me to be predominantly a Coweta-based district. So this is now going to be the chance for Fayette County to have representation. But I was just disgusted to see thousands upon thousands of good Republicans abandoned to the Democratic Party. And then you look at that combined with 128 Instagram posts with #Griffin and the only mention of Fayette County being the Pregnancy Resource Center coming to the Spalding border. And you see the way the judge situation played out, where Upson County picked our judges essentially, and our legislatures was just totally AWOL in defending our interests. And I just decided that somebody needed to step forward and run. And it may be in 2 years, somebody more talented and more skilled than me will step forward. But right now, for Fayette County, it's important that you take this opportunity to ensure that you have representation and have somebody who believes that you matter. This map is not some sort of abstract, where I have to figure out what it means. I didn't have to figure out that Peachtree City was in the district. I could tell it immediately. I knew from the beginning Fayetteville was in the district, and I could probably present under subpoena power some testimony that the incumbent didn't know that Fayetteville was in her district for the past 6 years, or part of Fayetteville. You deserve better representation than that under the Gold Dome. She is a nice person, she's a good conservative, but you need somebody who loves Fayette County with all their heart, and that person is me. Please vote for me on May 24th.
I have stood for 3 communities for 6 years. I have stood for lower taxes. I have stood for our Second Amendment. I have stood for election integrity. I have stood for a workforce. I've stood for home health workers. When you have to take care of a parent and you need some help, that's workforce. I have stood for parents' rights. I have stood for mandates that we don't particularly care for. I've stood for girls' sports because I remember Title IX. I grew up in the 70s. I know what that's like, having the leftover ball field. I've stood my ground. I'm battle-tested. I love all 3 communities. And I think I've done a hell of a job for you. I've worked hard. I have been responsive. My cell phone number has always been on my push card for 6 years. I give you my personal email because I see it every day. I don't have to go through 1,000 emails from all over the United States on the House side. So I'm Karen McGatt. It would be an honor to represent you again for 2 more years, and I hope that you will see it fit to send me in. Thank you.
I want want to thank our two candidates. Let's give both another round of applause. As Republicans, I believe we're blessed with two high-quality people and candidates. Thank y'all for being here with us tonight. Please go ahead. I'd like to thank my friend, my good friend and colleague, Angela Bean, for helping me moderate.
Thank you.
I have been asked by my boss here to make an announcement to remind everyone that not this Saturday, but a week from Saturday is our monthly first Saturday breakfast here at the headquarters. Elaine, who do we have? I've not put you on the spot. I think we
Stoney,
Dr. Yardy, and we have Butch Miller, candidate for Lieutenant Governor, and Stoney Mathis, State House candidate.
Thomas Smith.
And Tommy Smith, candidate for State Senate District 34. So please join us. If you're a regular, we want to see you. If this is your new person, we'd love for you to come back. And I'd like to thank the committee that put this on. And thank you all for being here. And we wish you a good night, and we'll see you next time. Have a good evening.